Okay, we are live. This is Attorney Vince Davis, and this is The Secret: How to Fight CPS and Win. Tonight we're joined by a very special guest, Miss Bridget. Miss Bridget, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So, what state in our country are you coming from?
California.
Oh, okay. You in northern, central, southern California?
Northern.
Okay, very good. Are you hesitant about naming the county you're in? You don't have to.
I'm completely open. I just know that there is some, like, don't say names, things like that, right?
Okay.
I'm in Shasta County, though.
Oh, okay. Shasta County. I have done a few cases in Shasta County, believe it or not. Um, and the last time I was there, I ran into an attorney who used to be in Los Angeles as I think she was first a parent's attorney, court-appointed attorney, and then I think she was a minors court-appointed attorney. But in Shasta, she represents the social workers. She works for the Office of the County Council and represents social workers. Just funny seeing someone, from LA that used to work as a court appointed attorney there, ending up in Shasta. But, a very beautiful area and county. Anyway, so what's going on in Shasta that has got you on our show tonight?
Well, my son is 6 years old this August. He was taken at 5 days old, and he is now adopted, and he and I do not see each other.
When did that happen?
I fought until we did reunify, but I lost him a week before my case was set to close. Our last visit was February 7th, 2020. His adoption was finalized January of 2021.
And do you believe that you were treated unfairly by CPS?
My appeals attorney through the state of California told me that they had multiple opportunities to help me and they chose not to. Yes, I do believe that they were.
Why do you think that? Why do you think that was?
Well, um, my mom and my little sister were a big part of my case in being in my social, talking to my social worker and saying bad things about me. And I do not even have a relationship with them. It's been a year since I've talked to my mom. And so I self-destructed. I have a lot of responsibility to take for why the case went the way it did, but also had I been forced into a rehab center, which I was considered not a drug addict, I was only considered an abused woman, and I would always be an abused woman, and the shelter here wouldn't even help me because I was also a perpetrator in domestic violence because it was mutual domestic violence, and then I actually got into drugs afterwards. After they took my son. So, long story, if I was locked down, maybe I would have been given more of a chance to have some healing. But instead, I just kept not doing the right thing.
Do you how long were you involved in the CPS system from beginning to the time that you lost your parental rights and the child was adopted?
From the day he was born, which was August 6th, 2017, to our last visit, which was February 7th, 2020. In 2019, December of 2019, when he was about 18 months, We reunified for 6 months.
Hmm.
After
Now,
he was set to be adopted, I appealed. I fought all the way up until like they took my reunification services,
mhm,
and then they took my parental rights.
right.
So
Now, did
I kept
you said your mother and your little sister would they were against you or helping you?
they were against me. My mom was the one that called CPS.
Do you have contact with them today?
Not anymore. No.
Do they live there in Shasta County?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a small place. You don't
Yeah.
run into them like at the grocery store or something?
I work for a grocery store. Run into everybody there, but they don't shop there.
Mhm.
They don't come around me.
Well,
Um,
tell me something. This video is being watched live right now, and it will live on 8 social media platforms probably forever. And people watch these, over and over. People come across them. Tell me something. Being a veteran of the CPS battle and war, what would be the most important thing you would tell parents when they get involved in this type of case?
Shut down all of the outside chaos and focus on yourself. Seek the healing and seek the help. Whatever it is that's going on that's got you there, you're the parent. And you just have to. Sometimes I see my perspective as something that I I have the worst consequence ever. So would I have actually done right by my child had I reunified? So think about that before it's too late.
You know, is your child was your child adopted by a relative or by strangers?
A social worker.
A social worker from Shasta County?
Yes, that's another point that that's in my story. He actually was placed in about, if I'm correct, 6 different placements before being adopted. The last placement after he was with me was with his paternal oldest aunt. She was going to adopt him, but chose that it wasn't what was best for him. And when she gave him back to CPS here in Shasta County, a social worker working for CPS adopted him because her daughter, who is my age, was his babysitter during foster care. And I met her doing drugs last year. And she told me everything about their family that I wasn't supposed to know.
Well, did this girl end up adopting the child or
Her mother did
okay. And now you know all the family dirt and
details.
so
And
let me
that
tell
she
you,
was using drugs while watching my child and while he was in foster care.
you know, I don't want to give you any false hope, but several months ago, feels like 5 or 6 months ago, we had a woman on as a guest from San Diego County. And after 5 years of having lost her parental rights, lost every appeal possible, she got her child back and her parental rights reinstated. And I happen to know that this is true because before she was ever on my show, I she called me to represent her. And what she was trying to do, I thought was just so way out there that I didn't want to represent her, charge her money. And she begged me for referrals, for to other attorneys. And I gave her a referral to someone who I know, and he took the case. And she got her kid back and her rights reinstated. Now, granted, in her case, the stars aligned, right? It's like a 1 in 1,000 shot, but she got her child back and she got her rights reinstated through the county of San Diego. So, people say all the time, never give up, never give up, never give up. And I've been criticized sometimes in cases about telling parents, or relatives that there's possibilities. Now, I'm not saying that it's definite or guaranteed, absolutely not. But there are possibilities of things that happen. You'd be surprised. These cases involve people and children. Strange stuff happens, you know, things that you never would have dreamed of. Um, I don't know what the woman told you while using drugs, but, if it was anything that may be fraudulent about the adoption or about the foster care placement, you might want to talk to a lawyer about possibly setting aside the adoption. People think you can't set aside an adoption in California, and that's not true. There's actually provisions in the family code to set aside an adoption based upon different things. One of them is fraud. So look into that, talk to an attorney about that. Now, the number of attorneys that probably have done that is few and far between because it's such a rare thing, right? But that doesn't mean you won't find somebody, some guy or gal that will be out there that will have experience, or even if they don't have experience, they might be able to figure it out. So think about that. One of the things that I found very interesting when I was up in Shasta, the few times I was up there, was that everybody had American Indian ancestry. They had somewhere back in their blood or their relation American Indian ancestry. And so I wanted to ask you, did your child have any American Indian ancestry?
So, my son's appeal stopping his adoption went through because my county did not look into his Indian ancestry properly. And when the appeals attorney for ICWA, the whole final verdict was that he was not found to have any legal documentation to be Indian, but his father's side is African American, and his paternal aunt was a bit upset because his side of the family has already looked into it. And then my mom wanted to say there was some story about my family. So when it comes down to it, I still feel like his father was mistreated too. And he's African American, and he was given to a family with a biracial family, and they're now split up. It's the same thing that was probably going to happen that was happening between the father and I, but it was very escalated between us. So I still feel like, he still would have been
You
better off
know,
with me.
you
Like,
know,
I'm his mom, but yeah.
one of the things that you could do is you could get, they have these DNA tests. You and or the father could take DNA tests to prove or disprove, American Indian ancestry. And there was and I don't know all the details, but there was a case, seems like 6 months ago, a very famous case that came out about American Indian ancestry. And what the case did was recognize people of American Indian ancestry that you would think were African Americans. Now, apparently, throughout history, many African Americans were taken in by Indian tribes and became part of the tribe and had families, etc., etc. And this relatively new case recognized that and recognized that, there's a whole lot of Black folks out there with American Indian ancestry. And arguably, the American Indian laws, ICWA, could apply to these children. And, under ICWA, you have there are different laws and different burdens and different standards. They're more favorable to the parents in order to promote American Indian heritage. So, I mean, you could take a look at that. And if you guys have American Indian ancestry, and the tribe may want to become involved with that child, um, you might be able to make a motion to set aside everything for violation of ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act. The longer you wait, the less likely that you'll be able to do that, because the courts would probably take the time factor involved. But I would definitely find out. I have a case right now in it's not northern, it's like the Bay Area of California, and I represent a woman who lost her parental rights, and um, it came out later that the father had American Indian ancestry, and the Court of Appeals, they didn't reverse the they reversed the termination, sent the case back, and told the trial court to comply with ICWA before trying to terminate again. And that's been several months. And as it turns out, the father actually has American Indian ancestry from like 2 or 3 different tribes, formally recognized tribes, and that's the only thing right now that's holding, stopping the termination and adoption, and it's giving the chance for the parents to get more services behind them that they're paying for, and try to go back into court, to try to get visitation or more reunification services, et cetera, et cetera. And I think 1 or 2 of the tribes is willing to get involved. If they get involved, it's over. There will be no termination of rights. It reminds me of a case that was in Ventura County. And I wasn't on this case, but I knew an attorney who eventually got the kids back to the parents. These 2 people, young people, were living in Ventura, and allegedly they had a bad drug problem and domestic violence problem. And at the very first hearing, they ask, "Do you have any American Indian ancestry?" And it just so happened that both of these parents from Alaska were both from different tribes. So the judge said, "Well, what tribe?" And in Ventura, it's kind of like Shasta. There's a large American Indian or heritage population, and they named their tribes. Each of them named their tribes, and um, the county council allegedly argued that since they were from Alaska, that didn't count as American Indian tribes, which seems kind of bizarre. But apparently the judge went along with it. The case goes on. They're very slow in getting themselves together. They eventually do, but too little, too late. The rights are terminated, and I don't know if the adoption had gone through or not. I don't think it had yet, but the rights were terminated. And, they thought, well, they've lost their kid forever. A friend of mine was randomly appointed to the case to represent, I think it was the father, in the appeal for the termination of his rights. And he, being the very thorough attorney that he is, went back all the way to see what happened. And one of the things he came across was this discussion about, are you American Indian? Yes, we're from Alaska. Oh, no, that's not real American Indians, Judge. So ICWA doesn't apply. Now, it was, I guess, fate that he found this out, because the attorney, he happens to be American Indian. I think he's from a tribe in Arizona. But he takes the process all the way through, takes it up on appeal, gets the termination set aside, and the case is sent back all the way to the beginning, to the detention hearing. Now, they still don't have the kids still with the used to be adoptive parents who are not the adoptive parents anymore, and they have a detention hearing. But at this time of the detention, this new detention hearing, the parents had gotten themselves together. been testing clean for months, been to domestic violence counseling, did the parenting, whatever, blah, 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 blah. So they weren't the same parents as they were like 18 months or 24 months before. And the attorney argued, you have to return these kids to the parents because you don't have evidence today as you sit here that they're a risk to the child. They've been testing clean for months. They finished their domestic violence. Remember, I told you they were slow to get rolling, but they finally did.
That was something that was said in my case because my son was so young that I would not get myself together in the time that my child needed me to. But that's the reality of it. This takes time.
Anyway, the parents got the kids back and the case was closed.
That's
But
awesome.
getting back to yours, I mean, I would definitely, 23andMe is what, $39 or $29? I don't know. Relatively inexpensive to see if you and or the father have American Indian ancestry.
Yeah, I am not so allowed to communicate with the father. Along about more than a year ago, my mom had asked him about that. So,
Now, is your mom sad that you lost your children to strangers outside the family, or is she good with that?
so the CPS tried to say I had borderline personality disorder, and I don't know if this is accurate to say that my mom has that or not, because if she says she's sad about me losing them, I don't believe her. And she pretends like she cries and like she behaves a certain way towards me, but behind my back, or actually the last time I saw her to my face, she is very cold-hearted to me. Um,
Have you ever thought about counseling?
yeah, we were in counseling for about 6 months before my little sister came home, and then things changed again. While we were in counseling, like when she came home, the last thing I remember, like the last session, my mom was like evilly telling me that she'll put my sister before me and like that I don't matter. And then there was an explosion at our home, and the police were called by my little sister. And my mom stood by her side. I told my mom I was going to therapy and then I was going to work. She was welcome to go to that therapy session, and she didn't show up. And I left that therapy session and I got as much of my belongings from her home as I could, and I left and I never talked to them again.
You've never talked to them after all of this time?
No. I gave him so many chances, even during my case.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You, you know, I'll be 65 this year. And my father died when I was in my mid 50s. And there were some issues between he and I. And it's one of my biggest regrets that I didn't, you know, fix that relationship or make amends with that relationship. I don't know if that means anything to you, but something to consider.
during my, sorry.
What?
Oh, it meant a lot to me during my case, and I asked the social workers for help with my family issues, and they just told me somebody with no support shouldn't have their baby. But I hear you, like, she's my mom.
Yeah. I don't know what, happened between the two of you, and I'm not asking you to tell me, but, it's something that as you get older, you'll be thinking about. Anyway, so you gave the advice of focusing on yourself during these CPS cases. Anything else you can tell people as a veteran of this war, what they can do to probably, get their child back?
Yeah, don't give up. Continue to show up to all the classes and the reunification services and do what's right every day. And you will your life will get better.
Hmm.
And you do it sooner rather than later. And that's the system. Like, you got to do it fast.
You know, a lot of people I talk to, I get the feeling that they think that losing your child through adoption forever cannot happen. Like, this is America. How could that possibly happen? Did you ever feel that way?
Yeah, and they used it against me. It was kind of the honeymoon phase when I was in the hospital between the father and I. So I was in the protect my family mindset that nothing was wrong and I had a home to go to. Why did I need to go to a shelter? And so, for the length of my case, when things got more and more dangerous for me,
Hmm.
things escalated. I had bruises on me at visits. It still was not offered services or help or shelter.
Well,
So,
did you or your attorney ever bring up the fact that you weren't given appropriate services by CPS?
yeah,
And what did the judge decide?
um, that it was too late.
Anything you would change about what you did or didn't do during the case?
Yeah,
Give me an example.
I would stay away from dating relationships completely
Why do you say that?
because the reason my son was removed the second time was because I was dating a drug dealer. He wasn't abusive per se. I wasn't being called names or hit, but I was being used. I was vulnerable, alone, and right before they gave me my child back, I went on a dating app and hooked up with this guy who made me feel so special, but he was not a good person. Whereas the father was like a really, on paper, quote unquote, really good person, but abused me. And I went through like all this self discovery of like dating these men instead of like being in a recovery place with women who could keep me safe and protected when I didn't have a family or adults around me to keep me safe and stuff. Like, I was self-destructing all alone and I wasn't telling anybody. And I see that a lot. I see it in a lot of moms dating men and putting men before themselves. My case closed with I put men before the safety of myself and my child.
Hmm.
So um, you could not be a drug addict. You could have a really great job, a college degree, and the man in your house is not what's good for your kids. So,
You know, I've been doing this over 30 years, and I see that a lot. See it a lot, and it's something that most judges are very keen on. You know, they have life experiences, and you do certain things when you're 19 years old that you wouldn't do at 39 or 49 years old, right?
yeah. And it affects our kids.
Let me ask you something. Do you work full time right now?
Yes.
40 hours a week?
Yes.
The reason why I ask you is because I'm looking for a couple of people to do live streams or shows about the CPS experience, but more in the terms of giving advice, life advice, not legal advice. And you seem to be maybe the perfect fit for that type of show.
I would enjoy doing that because some way of giving back, that would be
Right.
nice.
Your audience would theoretically be nationwide.
Oh God.
Yeah. You know,
um,
I used to work with someone who used to tell me, and they were halfway right. They used to tell me, Vince, winning these cases has nothing to do with the law. It has everything to do with these people that we represent growing, maturing, understanding life. You get a client sometimes that's mid 20s. It's much different from the client that's mid 40s. And of course, sometimes I represent, relatives, grandparents that are my age or a little bit younger. And it's a different. They all look at the case and at life with different perspectives. And here's the problem: when you're young in your mid 20s, sometimes you have a hard time understanding what some judge is talking about, right?
oh yeah.
Judge may be 50 years old, 45, 50 years old. And the problem is they're judging you like you should be 45 or 50, and you're not. But that's the standard you're going to be held to. All these laws that we have and in the cases, they're not made by 25-year-olds. They're made with people that are, grown adults with grandchildren and grown children. And they've been around the block and they realize the mistakes even that they made. And then you're a 20 something coming into court. You don't realize that you're being held at a higher standard. And, well, not a higher, an older standard. And you have no clue because, when you're 25, you never been 35. You never been 45. And it's, I'm not going to ask you your age because I know that's not appropriate, but today, you know more than you knew 10 years ago about men, about dating, about relationships. Now, you still look pretty young, so I know you don't know everything, but you know more than you knew 10 years ago. What
Fair.
if you knew what you knew now 10 years ago? Would your life be different?
Yeah. My
A
son's
lot,
life would be different.
yeah, a lot different. So I see you as being able to talk to and communicate with people all over the United States that have these CPS cases. Because everybody calls me and they think that Lawyer Davis has the answers. Most of your answers aren't going to be found in the law.
Mm.
They're going to be found in how to deal with life, how to deal with people. Anyway, what I want you to do, the producer is still on the show with us. Grace is still on the show. I want you to, Grace, I want you to contact Bridget or Bridget contact Grace via email. And we can set up a show where you talk to people. The interesting thing about this is that these shows on social media, they can be 24/7, any type of day or night. Several years ago, I used to do a show at 5 a.m. in the morning. 5 a.m. in the morning. But, a lot of people weren't watching live from the West Coast naturally. But as the day went on, people started watching it, right? Because it's taped, it's instantly posted on the internet for all to see. So you can do your show anytime you want. You can do it once a week. You can do it 3 times a week. You can do it 7 days a week. It's up to you because the internet is always on and running.
Very true.
Okay, so promise me that you and Grace are going to hook up together, Bridget,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about the type of show. I don't want you to give legal advice because you're not a lawyer. I want you to give experience advice because you are a veteran of the war and I think you have a lot that you can share with people.
Thank you.
Okay?
Ready
Alrighty.
to meet you.
So thank you for being on the show tonight. Grace will be in touch with you, and we'll be working together soon. All right?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Bye-bye. Okay, we're almost towards the end of the show. Let me answer some questions here. Rayanne Swan, my 7-year-old son just passed away due to getting sick back in December. I'm sorry to hear that, Rayanne. He had been adopted at age 2. I was just notified about the passing last week. My condolences. My condolences. J May says, wash hands. Okay, Jay, I'm not sure what you're trying to tell me there. Deidre Payne, Mr. Davis. What, Deidre? What do you want to tell me? G Sense says on YouTube. By the way, if you're looking, whatever platform you're watching us on tonight, please like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. G says, thank you for having the courage to tell your story. It's so close to mine. You're talking about Bridget. I have been shamed due to this, but I take accountability for not leaving my abuser. But I learned a little too late. Understand. Miss Deidre says, where's Miss G and Cassandra? You know what, Deidre? That's a really good question. Really good question. Um, Lloyd Christmas says, have you ever included law enforcement in a civil rights lawsuit? You know what? I was going to say I personally have not, but maybe one time. But it's done routinely because sometimes law enforcement takes the blame with CPS when they come to your home and without a warrant take your child. Harley Neff says, how do I get my case relooked at due to misconduct? Harley, you're going to have to go to a lawyer and hire him or her to go over your case. And don't do one of these numbers. Somebody just asked me to review their case, and they said they didn't have any money, and I said, okay, well, how many pages we talking about? They told me it was over 10,000 pages. I said, I'm sorry, I can't review a 10,000 page case without charging you money. I still have to pay the bills and the rent. Deidre says, they said they would be here. You're absolutely right, Deidre. Maybe you can contact Miss G and find out what her excuse is. Okay, Roy says, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do when a judge rubber stamps orders and refuses to actually look at the law and facts of the case? You do something called an appeal or a writ. That's what you do, Roy. And you maybe seek second opinions. Deidre, shame on them. I'm glad you said it and not me. Deidre, at least when I say I'll be there on the show, I'm here. Deidre, I should be your new co-host. Deidre, that's a really good idea. You're such a great fan of the show, and you're always commenting. You know what? Grace is still here with me. Grace, I want you to talk to Deidre. You guys email each other and talk about getting on a show. We can start Deidre off as a co-host on my show before she has her own show. Deidre, I hope you're serious. I have some experience with CPS and would love to be a part of that advice as a series as well. Rayanne, if you are serious, please contact Grace at Vincent W. Davis, and she will hook you up and we'll talk about you being on a show or having your show. Alexandria says, I'm starting to think Mr. Davis is good at putting people on the spot. I'm a lawyer, Alexandria. Sometimes I can't help it. Harley says Vince Davis is so interested in doing that live stream. I have a lot of experience and ups and downs with CPS. Wow, I'm getting all these people voluntarily. Grace, are you paying attention? Harley Neff wants to be on a show or to do a show. Please contact him. Hey, Harley, I see you're watching on YouTube. Make sure you give me a like and a subscribe. Whoops. I have a call coming in. Sorry about that. And then we have G Sense. The lawyer for the social worker and the state said that the same thing to me because I was in the system since 2 weeks old until I was 18. You know, G, I would actually like to interview you. You were in the system for 18 years, and you have a very unique perspective on what happens in foster placement. So if you could contact Grace, Grace at Vincent W. Davis, I'd really appreciate it. I'd really like to talk to you about that. I tried to start a show several years ago, a show just for children who are no longer part of the system with their parents' permission, or young adults who used to be part of the foster care system, to have a show and share their experiences. Um, I think that we were all going to be surprised what they have to say about their foster care experience. Sometimes they're going to have very good things to say, and sometimes they're going to have some tragic things to tell us about our foster care system. Okay, folks, thank you for watching. This is the end of the show. I hope to be on tomorrow with another guest. If you're interested in being a guest, please email grace at vincentwdavis.com. All right, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Good night.